Good evening all, and welcome back to Paranoia Files. Tonight we venture into the frozen heart of America's last frontier with 8 of the most disturbing true Alaskan small-town crime stories ever documented. These accounts are not fiction, nor are they sensationalized retellings, but verified incidents that have left permanent scars on isolated communities where help is hours away and secrets run as deep as the permafrost. From the mysterious disappearances that have plagued remote villages to the sadistic predators who exploit Alaska's vast emptiness, each story exposes the darkest capabilities of human nature when freed from the constraints of civilization. Tonight you will hear confessions from those who survived encounters with serial killers operating on the Bering Sea, witnesses to cult atrocities hidden in the wilderness, and individuals haunted by unsolved crimes that authorities have abandoned or cannot explain. Every detail has been drawn from police reports, survivor testimony, and investigative records, with only names and specific locations altered to protect those who still live in fear of what they experienced. If you have not yet subscribed to Paranoia Files, do so now and ring the notification bell so you are alerted each time we uncover another chapter of true horror that the world has tried to forget. Leave a comment below sharing which story disturbed you most, or if you have your own experience from Alaska's isolated towns that the rest of us need to hear. I found my sister's journal 3 weeks after she disappeared. The police had already searched her apartment twice, but I needed to go through her things myself because that is what you do when someone you love vanishes without explanation. Delilah kept the journal in a wooden box under her bed, wrapped in one of our grandmother's old scarves. The last entry was dated March 14th, the morning she went missing. She wrote about the weather, how the sun felt warmer than it had in months, how she was looking forward to walking to the general store to pick up coffee and maybe some of those chocolate cookies she loved. Mundane details. Nothing that suggested within hours she would cease to exist in any traceable way. I had invited Delilah to visit me in Silver Creek for 2 weeks. The town sits in a valley about 200 miles north of Anchorage, accessible only by a single winding road that becomes impassable for half the year. The population hovers around 200 people, most of them connected to the old mining operations that shut down in the 1980s. I moved there for work, conducting environmental assessments for a consulting firm. Delilah was between jobs and going through a difficult breakup, so I thought the isolation might do her some good. I thought she would be safe there. That assumption haunts me every single day. The morning she disappeared was a Tuesday. I had left for a site visit at 6 in the morning and Delilah was still asleep on my couch. She texted me around 9 saying she was going to walk into town, maybe explore a bit, and that she would have dinner ready when I got home. I remember smiling at that text. I remember thinking how good it was to have her there, how we had not spent this much time together since we were teenagers. I got home at 7 that evening to a dark apartment and no dinner. I was not immediately worried. I assumed she had lost track of time or met someone in town. Silver Creek is small, but there is a bar, and people are generally friendly to newcomers. I waited until 9 before I started calling her phone. It went straight to voicemail every time. I walked into town myself, checking the bar first. No one had seen her. I went to the general store, which was closed, but the owner lived above it, so I knocked until Marcus Yellowbird came to the door in his bathrobe. Yes, he said. Delilah had come in that morning around 10. She bought coffee, a bag of cookies, and a local newspaper. They had talked for maybe 5 minutes about the weather and the hiking trails nearby. She had seemed cheerful. She paid in cash and left through the front door. That was the last time anyone admitted to seeing my sister. The police arrived the next morning, 2 state troopers from the nearest detachment, which was an hour and a half away. They took my statement, searched my apartment, and then conducted a broader search of the town. Silver Creek does not have security cameras everywhere like cities do, but the general store has one pointed at the register and another at the front entrance. The footage showed exactly what Marcus described. Delilah entering at 10:03 in the morning, browsing for a few minutes, talking with Marcus at the counter, paying, and then walking toward the front door. But here is the detail that makes my blood run cold every time I think about it. The camera shows her reaching for the door handle. Her hand is inches from the glass. And then she is just gone, not walking out, not moving backward, just absent from the frame in a way that makes no logical sense. The police claimed it was a glitch in the recording, a skipped frame, but I have watched that footage hundreds of times. It is not a glitch. One moment she is there, and the next, she is not. The back door of the store leads directly into the wilderness. There is a service entrance that Marcus uses for deliveries, and it exits onto a gravel area that transitions into forest within 50 feet. The police found that door propped open with a cinder block that morning. Marcus swore he had not left it that way. He kept it locked always because of bears. Someone had opened it. Someone had made sure it stayed open. The forest behind the store stretches for hundreds of miles, dense with spruce and hemlock, interrupted only by frozen streams and ravines. If someone went into that forest unprepared, especially as temperatures were still dropping to -30 degrees at night, they would not survive long. Search parties went out every day for 2 weeks. Volunteers from Silver Creek and neighboring communities, some who drove hours to help. We walked grid patterns through the snow, calling Delilah's name until our voices gave out. On the 4th day, someone found a single glove about 3 miles northeast of the store. It was Delilah's. I recognized the purple yarn, the crooked thumb that I had teased her about. But there was nothing else. No footprints leading to it or away from it because of the wind. No other clothing, no signs of a struggle, just a glove lying on top of the snow as if someone had placed it there deliberately. The police interviewed everyone in Silver Creek multiple times. In a town that small, everyone knows everyone, and secrets are supposedly impossible to keep. But no one knew anything. No one had seen Delilah after she left the store. No one had heard anything unusual that day. Marcus Yellowbird took a polygraph test and passed. The police investigated him thoroughly anyway because he was the last confirmed person to see her, but there was nothing. His alibi for the rest of that day was solid. He had been working in the store until closing with multiple customers confirming his presence. There were no charges, no arrests, no leads that went anywhere. After a month, the active search was called off. Delilah became another statistic, another missing person in a state where people disappear with disturbing regularity. I could not leave. I took a leave of absence from work and rented a room above the hardware store in Silver Creek. I needed to be where she had last been. I needed to keep looking because if I stopped, it meant accepting that she was gone. I spent months combing through missing persons reports, talking to anyone who would listen, reconstructing those last hours in every possible way. That is when I found the pattern. Over the past 15 years, 3 other women had disappeared from Silver Creek in almost identical circumstances. All of them were visitors, not permanent residents. All of them were in their 20s or early 30s. All of them vanished during the day in public areas with no witnesses and no physical evidence beyond the occasional item of clothing found miles away in the forest. The police had never connected these cases. They were spread out over enough time that different officers handled them, and the reports were filed separately with no cross-referencing. The first was a woman named Jennifer Cole in 2007. She had been visiting a friend and disappeared while walking to the post office. Her scarf was found 6 miles north of town. The second was Ashley Tran in 2012, who vanished while hiking a marked trail near Silver Creek. Her backpack was found empty, hanging from a tree branch. The third was Michaela Ortiz in 2017, who was staying at the bed and breakfast and disappeared between her room and the shared bathroom down the hall. Her slippers were found outside near the tree line. And now Delilah. 4 women, 4 disappearances, same location, same lack of evidence, same failure to find bodies or answers. I brought this information to the police. They listened politely and said they would look into it, but I could tell they thought I was grasping at straws, seeing patterns where there was only coincidence. But I know there is a pattern. I know someone in Silver Creek has been doing this for 15 years. Someone who knows the forest. Someone who knows how to make people disappear. Someone who is trusted enough that no one suspects them. I started watching everyone differently after that. Marcus Yellowbird, who was always so helpful and kind. The bartender who remembered everyone's drinks. The mayor who organized search parties. The mechanic who fixed my car for free. Any of them could be responsible. All of them could be lying. I have been living in Silver Creek for 5 years now. I never went back to my old life. I got a job at the hardware store and rented a small cabin on the edge of town. People think I am obsessed, and they are right. I watch the newcomers carefully, especially young women traveling alone. I warn them when I can, though I have to be subtle because the town has grown tired of my theories. They want to move on. They want to believe that bad things do not happen here, that Silver Creek is safe despite the evidence. But I cannot move on. I cannot pretend. 6 months ago, I learned about the mining tunnels. Silver Creek was built on top of an extensive network of underground passages, remnants of the old operations. Most of them were sealed off decades ago, but not all of them. There are access points scattered throughout the town, some hidden, some forgotten. I found a map in the Historical Society archives, and it shows tunnels running directly beneath the general store. The police never searched those tunnels. They claimed they were too dangerous, too unstable. But I think that is where Delilah is. I think that is where all of them are. I go down into the accessible tunnels whenever I can. I have a good flashlight and a rope tied to the entrance so I can find my way back. The tunnels are dark and cold and smell like wet earth and decay. Some of them have collapsed, blocking my path. Others branch off in directions the map does not show. I have found old equipment, rotted timbers, pools of stagnant water. But I have not found Delilah, not yet. Last week, something changed. I was in my cabin late at night going over the map again when I heard a sound beneath my floor. A scratching, rhythmic and deliberate. My cabin is old, and I have always assumed the noises were just the wood settling or animals underneath. But this was different. This sounded intentional. I pressed my ear to the floor and listened. The scratching continued for several minutes and then stopped. I have heard it 3 times since then, always late at night, always in the same pattern. I checked the crawl space under my cabin, but there is nothing there except dirt and darkness. I think the tunnels extend farther than the map shows. I think they go under most of Silver Creek, including where I live. And I think someone is down there. Someone who knows I am looking. Someone who is sending me a message. I do not know if it is a warning or an invitation, but I know I cannot ignore it. Tomorrow night, I am going back into the tunnels with enough supplies to stay down there for as long as it takes. I am going to find where they connect to my cabin. I am going to find what is making that sound. I am going to find Delilah. Or whoever has been taking these women is going to find me first. Either way, I will finally have answers. And if I disappear like the others, maybe someone will notice the pattern in 5 women instead of 4. Maybe someone will keep looking the way I have. Maybe Silver Creek will finally give up its secrets, even if I am not alive to hear them. But I do not think anyone will keep looking. This town has a way of making people forget. It has a way of erasing evidence and memory until all that remains is the uncomfortable feeling that something is wrong. Something has always been wrong, but no one can quite say what. That is how Silver Creek survives. That is how it keeps its population steady despite the disappearances. People do not leave because they do not believe they are in danger. And the ones who do leave never talk about why. They just go, quietly, taking their suspicions with them. I will not leave quietly. If I disappear, this journal will remain. And anyone who reads it will know that Silver Creek is not safe. That something evil lives here, hidden beneath the surface, waiting for the next visitor who wanders too far from where they should be. The next person who trusts the wrong smile, who believes the wrong story, who fails to notice when a door that should be locked is standing open. That is all it takes, one unlocked door and you are gone forever. 911. What is your emergency? There is someone on the bridge. I need you to send someone right now. Sir, can you tell me your location? The old footbridge over Kennecott River. The one near the ghost town. There is a person standing in the middle and they are not moving, and I think something is really wrong with them. Can you describe what you are seeing? I cannot get any closer. I tried, but my truck will not start now and my phone barely works. Please just send someone. Sir, stay calm. Officers are on their way. Can you still see the person on the bridge? Yes, they are still there. They have not moved at all. Please hurry. That call came in on November 9th, 2019 at 11:47 at night. I know because I was the dispatcher who took it. My name is Trevor Hammond, and I worked the overnight shift for the Alaska State Troopers Dispatch Center in Glen Allen for 6 years. I have taken thousands of calls in that time. Domestic disturbances, car accidents, bear encounters, missing hikers. You learn to keep your voice steady no matter what someone is telling you. You learn to stay detached because if you let every emergency get under your skin, you will not last a month in this job. But that call was different. The caller's name was Bryce Morrison, and something in his voice made my hands go cold. It was not panic exactly. It was terror mixed with confusion, like he could not reconcile what he was seeing with anything that made sense. I dispatched 2 troopers immediately. The drive from Glen Allen to the Kennecott area takes about an hour and a half under good conditions. Longer at night on icy roads. I stayed on the line with Bryce for as long as the connection held, which was not long. Cell service in that area is almost non-existent. The call dropped after maybe 3 minutes and I could not get him back. All I could do was wait and listen to the radio chatter as the officers made their way to the location. When they arrived, they found Bryce sitting in his truck with the driver's door open, staring straight ahead. He was unresponsive. Not unconscious, but not really there either. His eyes were open and he was breathing, but he would not acknowledge the officers when they spoke to him. They had to physically guide him out of the vehicle. The figure he reported on the bridge was gone. The officers searched the area with flashlights and found nothing. No footprints in the frost on the bridge planks. No signs that anyone had been there at all. They checked the river below, thinking maybe someone had fallen or jumped, but the water was too dark and too fast to see anything. Bryce was taken to the hospital in Glen Allen. He stayed catatonic for nearly 18 hours before he started responding to questions. And even then, he would not talk about what he saw. He just kept saying that the figure turned toward him and that something about it was wrong. When pressed for details, he would shut down completely. The doctor said it was acute psychological trauma, but they could not explain what had caused it. I could not stop thinking about that call. I started researching the footbridge over the Kennecott River, the one that connects the old ghost town to the McCarthy area. It was built in the early 1900s as part of the copper mining operations that made Kennecott boom for a few decades before the mine shut down in 1938. The town was abandoned almost overnight. Workers were given 24 hours notice to pack their belongings and leave, and most of them left furniture, dishes, personal items behind. The place became a time capsule. The bridge itself is narrow, just wide enough for foot traffic, suspended over the river with cables and wooden planks. It sways when you walk across it, and in the winter, ice forms on the railings and makes it treacherous. What I found in my research made me uneasy. Over the past 40 years, 6 people had died on or near that bridge. All of them were ruled suicides. All of them involved someone jumping into the river or being found at the base of the cliffs nearby. But in 3 of those cases, witnesses reported seeing another person on the bridge with the victim shortly before the death. When police investigated, no second person was ever found. No footprints, no identification, nothing. The witnesses described the figure as tall, motionless, standing in a way that seemed unnatural. One witness from 1994 said the figure's arms were too long, that they hung past where arms should end. Another witness from 2006 said the figure's face did not look right, that it seemed blurred or incomplete, like trying to focus on something in a dream. I kept digging and found something even older. In 1897, during the bridge's original construction, there was an accident. 12 men were killed when a section of scaffolding collapsed and they fell into the river. The bodies were never recovered because the current was too strong and the water too cold. Construction continued after a brief delay and the bridge was completed later that year. But there was a survivor. A man named Elias Cade walked away from the accident without a scratch. The foreman's report, which I found in a digitized archive, noted that Elias should have been on the scaffolding when it fell, but was somehow standing on the shore when the collapse happened. No one saw him move. No one could explain how he avoided the fall. Elias claimed he did not remember that one moment he was working and the next he was on solid ground. Elias Cade became erratic after the accident. He stopped eating, stopped sleeping, and talked constantly about owing a debt. He told other workers that something had taken his place in the fall, that he was supposed to die, but someone else died instead. The foreman eventually sent him to an asylum in Valdez because he was scaring the other men. Records show he was released in 1899, but there is no record of where he went after that. No death certificate, no forwarding address, nothing. He just vanished from all documentation. I found one final mention of his name in a local newspaper from 1900. A bartender in McCarthy reported serving a man who matched Elias Cade's description, and the man told him that he was waiting for the debt to be called. When the bartender asked what he meant, the man smiled and said that bridges always collect what they are owed. I tried to convince myself that this was all coincidence. Ghost stories and urban legends that grow around isolated places. But then I saw the figure myself. It was 3 years after Bryce Morrison's call. I had transferred to a different dispatch center by then, but I was visiting the Kennecott area with some friends who wanted to see the ghost town. We hiked to the footbridge in the late afternoon. The light was starting to fade and the temperature was dropping fast. My friends walked across first and I stayed behind to take a photo. That is when I saw him, standing in the exact center of the bridge. Tall, motionless, wearing what looked like old work clothes. The proportions were wrong. His arms hung too low. His head seemed too small for his body, or maybe his body was too large for his head. I cannot describe it properly because my brain could not process what I was looking at. I called out to my friends, but they had already crossed and were out of sight around a bend. The figure on the bridge turned toward me. I did not see his face turn. I just suddenly had the sense that he was looking directly at me, even though I could not make out any features. Where his face should have been, there was just a kind of blurred space, like static on a television screen. I felt an overwhelming urge to walk onto the bridge, Not because I wanted to, but because something was pulling me forward. It felt like hands on my shoulders pushing me gently but insistently toward the edge. I dug my heels into the ground and forced myself to look away. When I looked back, the figure was gone. I did not tell my friends what I saw. I made an excuse about feeling sick and we left immediately. I drove the whole way back to Glenallen in silence, trying to convince myself it was a trick of the light or exhaustion or stress. But I knew what I had seen, and I knew what I had felt. That bridge wanted me to jump, or something on that bridge wanted me to jump. The urge was not my own. It was planted, external, intrusive. For weeks afterward, I could not stop thinking about it. I had nightmares where I was standing on the bridge and the figure was behind me, whispering things I could not quite hear but understood on some instinctual level. The message was always the same. You owe. Everyone owes. The bridge collects. 2 months after my encounter, Bryce Morrison was found dead in his cabin outside of Palmer. He had hanged himself. The police report said he left a note, but they would not tell me what it said because I was not family. I contacted his sister, who I tracked down through public records and convinced her to tell me. The note was only 4 words. He keeps his promises. She had no idea what it meant. She said Bryce had never been the same after that night on the bridge, that he became withdrawn and paranoid, that he talked about feeling watched all the time. She said he started hearing things, whispers in the middle of the night, footsteps on his porch when no one was there. She tried to get him help, but he refused. He said help would not matter because the debt was owed and debts always get collected. I left Alaska 6 months later. I could not stay. Every time I drove past a bridge, I felt that same pull, that same urge to stop the car and walk to the edge. It was not as strong as it had been at Kennecott, but it was there. A whisper instead of a shout. I moved to Oregon and got a job doing dispatch for a county sheriff's office. I tried to forget. But you cannot forget something like that. You cannot unsee a figure that should not exist. You cannot unfeel hands that were not there pushing you toward death. The bridge is still standing. I check sometimes, looking at satellite images online, reading local news from the area. There have been discussions about demolishing it and building something more modern and safer. But every time the proposal gains traction, something prevents it. Budget issues, environmental concerns, historical preservation arguments. It is always something. The bridge remains. And every few years, someone else dies there. The most recent was last summer. A hiker from Oregon, which felt like a cruel irony, jumped from the bridge into the river. Witnesses said he seemed calm, that he climbed over the railing methodically and stepped off without hesitation. One witness mentioned seeing another person on the bridge standing farther down watching. By the time anyone thought to look for that person, they were gone. I got a call 3 weeks ago, not on my work line, on my personal cell. I did not recognize the number, and when I answered, there was only silence. But in that silence, I heard something. The creak of wooden planks, the rush of water, wind through cables, the sounds of a bridge swaying. I hung up immediately and blocked the number. 2 days later, I got another call from a different number. Same thing. Silence. And then the sounds of the bridge. It has happened 4 times now. I have stopped answering calls from numbers I do not know, but it does not matter. Last night, I woke up at 3 in the morning to the sound of footsteps on my apartment balcony. Heavy, deliberate footsteps. I live on the 4th floor. There is no way to access my balcony except through my apartment. I did not get up to look. I stayed in bed with my eyes closed, trying to convince myself it was a dream. But when I finally opened my eyes and looked toward the sliding glass door, there was a handprint on the outside of the glass. A large handprint, fingers too long, pressed against the window like someone had been leaning there watching me sleep. I am writing this because I do not know what else to do. I do not know if telling the story will help or make it worse. But I need someone to know what happened. I need there to be a record. The bridge keeper exists. Elias Cade, or whatever he became, is still there. And he does not stay on the bridge. He follows. He collects. I do not know why he chose Bryce Morrison or why he is choosing me now, but I can feel it happening. The pull is getting stronger. My thoughts drift toward heights, toward edges, toward the idea that falling might feel like relief. I know these are not my thoughts, but knowing does not stop them. I am trying to resist. I am trying to hold on. But I understand now what Bryce felt in those final months. The weight of being marked, the inevitability of the debt. If you ever find yourself near the Kennecott footbridge, do not cross it at dusk or after dark. Do not look too closely at anyone standing on it. And if you feel an urge to jump, to lean over the railing just a little farther to see how the water looks from above, recognize that urge for what it is. It is not yours. It never was. The bridge is hungry. It has been hungry since 1897, and it will never be satisfied. 12 men died building it, and their debt gets passed along to anyone foolish enough to stand where they fell. Elias Cade made a deal to survive, and the bridge has been keeping that deal ever since. One life for another, always collecting, always patient. I do not think I have much time left. You think you know someone until you see their hunting cabin. That is what kept running through my mind as I stood in Wesley Graves' basement, surrounded by photographs of dead women. You think you know someone because you grew up with them, because you shared lunches in elementary school and went to prom in the same group and stood as a groomsman at their wedding. You think 28 years of friendship means you understand who a person really is. But you do not know anything. You cannot know what lives inside another person until they show you, and by then it is usually too late to walk away safely. Wesley and I met in first grade in Wasilla. We bonded over a shared love of fishing and Star Wars action figures. Our families were not close, but Wesley and I were inseparable through high school. We both stayed in Alaska after graduation, while most of our friends left for college in the lower 48. Wesley went into construction, and I became a surveyor for the state. We saw each other less as we got older, as adults do, but we maintained one tradition. Every October we went on a hunting trip, just the two of us, deep into the wilderness, away from cell service and responsibilities. It was sacred time, the 1 week a year where we could pretend we were still kids with no obligations beyond catching our dinner and staying warm. This year, Wesley suggested we use his new cabin. He had been talking about it for months, how he had finally saved enough to buy property out near Lake Louise, how remote it was, how perfect for hunting. I was excited. Our usual spots had become more crowded over the years with guided tours and amateur hunters who did not respect the land. The idea of a private cabin, even farther from civilization than we usually went, sounded ideal. I should have questioned why he wanted to go somewhere so isolated. I should have noticed how his demeanor had changed over the past year, but I did not. I was too focused on work stress and my own problems to see that my best friend had become something I would not recognize. We left on October 12th. The drive to the cabin took 6 hours, the last 2 on unpaved logging roads that barely qualified as trails. Wesley's truck handled it fine, but I remember thinking that if we broke down out here, we would be in serious trouble. No cell service, no other vehicles, just endless forest and the early edge of winter. The cabin itself was small but well built, maybe 20 by 20 feet, with a loft for sleeping and a wood stove for heat. It looked exactly like what you would expect from a hunting cabin. Rustic, functional, isolated. What I did not see from the outside was the basement. We spent the first day settling in and scouting the area. Wesley seemed off. quieter than usual, but I attributed it to work stress. He had mentioned some problems with his contracting business, late payments, difficult clients. I tried to draw him out, to get him talking the way we used to, but he remained distant. That night we ate freeze-dried stew and played cards by lantern light. Wesley drank more than I had ever seen him drink, nearly a full bottle of whiskey by himself. I went to bed around 10, climbing the ladder to the loft while Wesley stayed at the table, staring into his glass like it held answers to questions he had not asked. I woke up around 2 in the morning, needing to use the bathroom. The cabin was cold, the fire in the stove reduced to embers. Wesley was not in his sleeping bag on the lower floor. I assumed he had gone outside to relieve himself or maybe to smoke. He had taken up cigarettes recently, another change I had noted but not questioned. I climbed down the ladder and put on my boots. That is when I noticed the open door, not the front door. A door in the floor, partially hidden beneath a rug near the corner of the room. I had not noticed it before because the rug covered it completely, but now it was pulled aside and the door was propped open with a lantern sitting at the top of a set of stairs leading down. I should have called out for Wesley. I should have waited for him to return. But curiosity and concern pushed me forward. What if he had fallen? What if he was hurt? I took the lantern and descended into the basement. The stairs were rough wood, newer than the cabin itself, and they creaked under my weight. The basement was not a full basement, more of a cellar, maybe 8 feet deep and running the length of the cabin. The smell hit me first, not decay, but something chemical. Bleach and something else I could not identify. The walls were lined with shelves, and on those shelves were supplies. Zip ties, duct tape, plastic sheeting, a hunting knife with a blade longer than any knife you would need for field dressing game. And then I saw the photographs. They covered the far wall, dozens of them, maybe 50 or more. Polaroids. Each one showed a woman's face, not portraits. These were women in terror. Eyes wide, mouths open, some gagged, some crying, some frozen in expressions of desperation that made my stomach turn. I recognized none of them. They were not women from our town, not anyone I had ever seen. But I knew what I was looking at. I knew what this room meant. I stood there holding the lantern, trying to make sense of it, trying to convince myself there was an explanation that did not end with my best friend being a serial killer. Maybe it was a project, maybe it was art, maybe it was anything other than what it obviously was. I heard the front door of the cabin open above me. Footsteps crossed the floor, heavy boots on wood planks. I should have run. I should have tried to get up the stairs and out of the cabin while I had the chance. But I was frozen. My brain could not process what was happening fast enough to tell my body to move. The footsteps stopped at the top of the basement stairs. Wesley's voice came down, calm and flat. "I was hoping you would not find that, Dallas. I really was." He descended the stairs slowly, methodically, holding a pistol in his right hand. Not pointed at me, not yet, but present. A reminder of the power dynamic that had shifted in the span of seconds. Wesley reached the bottom of the stairs and looked at the wall of photographs like he was admiring artwork. "You are going to ask me questions," he said. "So I will save you the trouble. Yes, they are real. Yes, I killed them, all of them, over 8 years. The first one was an accident, or at least I told myself it was. I picked up a hitchhiker outside of Talk, gave her a ride, and when she started to get out, I just did not want her to leave. I did not plan it. I did not even understand what I was doing until it was over. But after, I felt more alive than I had ever felt. And I knew I would do it again." He turned to look at me then, and his eyes were empty. Not crazy, not full of rage or malice, just empty. "You are wondering why I am telling you this," he continued. The answer is that I do not know what to do about you, Dallas. I did not bring you here for this. I brought you here because this is the last place on earth where I feel like myself, and I wanted to share it with my oldest friend. But you had to be nosy. You had to go where you did not belong. Now we have a problem. He sat down on one of the lower steps, still holding the gun loosely in his hand. I targeted transient workers at the fishing canneries. Seasonal people who move around. No family looking for them. No permanent address. They come to Alaska to disappear anyway, to start over or run from something. I just helped them disappear more permanently. I found my voice finally, though it came out weak and shaking. Wesley, you need help. We can get you help. He laughed at that, a short, bitter sound. Help? You think this is something that can be fixed? This is not an illness, Dallas. This is who I am. This is who I have been for 8 years, maybe longer, maybe always. He stood up, pacing now, the gun swinging in his hand carelessly. The problem is you. You are not a transient worker. People know you came here with me. If you disappear, they will ask questions. They will look. And I like my life. I like my freedom. I am not ready to give that up. We stayed in that basement for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Wesley talked. I listened. He described his methods in detail, the way a craftsman might describe his work, how he scouted the canneries during hiring season, how he identified women who were alone, who had no emergency contacts, who paid for everything in cash, how he befriended them, offered help, earned trust, how he brought them to the cabin under the guise of showing them good fishing spots or offering temporary housing, what he did to them in this basement, how long he kept them before ending it, how he disposed of the bodies in places where they would never be found, weighted down in deep lakes or buried in locations only he knew. He spoke without emotion, without remorse, without any recognition that what he was describing was monstrous. I waited. I watched. I assessed. My father had been a wilderness guide before he retired, and he taught me survival skills from the time I could walk. One of those skills was patience. When you are being stalked by a bear, you do not panic. You wait for the moment when the bear's attention shifts, and then you act. Wesley's attention shifted when he started ranting about a woman who had fought back, who had broken his nose and almost escaped. He gestured wildly, and the gun pointed away from me for just a second. I rushed him. I am not a violent person. I have been in maybe 3 fights in my entire life, all of them in high school. But in that moment, fueled by adrenaline and absolute terror, I fought like my life depended on it, because it did. We crashed into the shelves. Supplies fell everywhere. The gun went off, deafening in the confined space, the bullet embedding in the wooden wall somewhere above us. I managed to grab the hunting knife from where it had fallen, and I drove it into Wesley's shoulder. Not deep enough to kill, but deep enough to make him scream and drop the gun. I did not stay to fight more. I ran. Up the stairs, across the cabin floor, out the front door, into the freezing October night. I had no coat, no supplies, no plan. I just ran into the forest, away from the cabin, away from Wesley, away from the nightmare I had stumbled into. The next 3 days are a blur of survival. I knew roughly which direction we had come from, but without the truck and without a map, I was guessing. The temperature dropped below freezing at night. I had no fire, no food, no water, except what I could find in streams. I walked during the day and found shelter under fallen trees at night, curling into a ball to preserve heat. My hands and feet went numb. I started hallucinating on the 3rd day, seeing Wesley behind every tree, hearing his voice calling my name. I do not know how far I walked, 20 miles, maybe 30. It felt like 100. A hunting party from a different area found me on the afternoon of the 3rd day. I was hypothermic and incoherent. They got me to their truck. wrapped me in blankets, and drove me to the nearest hospital in Glenallen. I told the police everything as soon as I could speak clearly. They sent a team to Wesley's cabin that same night. By the time they arrived, the cabin was burning. Wesley had set it on fire and fled. They found the remains of the basement, enough evidence to confirm my story, but Wesley was gone. They searched for weeks. Dogs, helicopters, search teams covering hundreds of square miles. Nothing, no trace of him. They identified 11 victims from the photographs I described, cross-referencing with missing persons reports from canneries and seasonal work programs across Alaska. Only 3 bodies were ever recovered, buried in locations that Wesley had marked on a map found in his truck, which he had abandoned 20 miles from the cabin. The other 8 remain missing. Their families have no closure, no bodies to bury. Just the knowledge that someone they loved died terrified and alone at the hands of a man who felt nothing. I lost 3 toes and 2 fingers to frostbite. I carry scars from that night, physical and otherwise. I do not hunt anymore. I do not go into the wilderness. I barely leave my apartment in Anchorage. I sleep with lights on and a gun under my pillow. I see therapists, take medication, do all the things you are supposed to do to recover from trauma. But you do not recover from something like this. You just learn to live with it. Wesley has been sighted, or at least people claim to have seen him. A man matching his description buying supplies in Fairbanks, another sighting in Juneau, a third in Nome. The police investigate each one, but they never find him. Alaska is too big, too wild, too easy to disappear into if you know what you are doing. And Wesley knows. He has been making people disappear for years. Now he is making himself disappear. But I know he is still out there. I know he is still hunting. And I know that one day he will come back to finish what he started, because I am the loose end. I am the witness. I am the one who got away. And Wesley does not leave loose ends. Bishop Creek Commune welcomes new families, embraces simple living. Alaska Frontier Daily, May 15, 2018. A growing religious community nestled in the wilderness near Bishop Creek has opened its doors to new members seeking refuge from modern society's complexities. The group, led by spiritual leader Brother Ezekiel, emphasizes sustainable living, shared resources, and devotion to faith. We believe that true peace comes from simplicity and connection to the land, Brother Ezekiel told this reporter during a recent visit. The commune currently houses 35 members, including 12 children, and continues to accept applications from those seeking a different way of life. I kept that newspaper clipping in my case file for 3 years. My name is Sienna Walsh, and I was a social worker for the State of Alaska Division of Child and Family Services. The Bishop Creek commune came across my desk in August of 2018, 3 months after that cheerful article ran. An anonymous tip suggested children at the commune were being neglected, possibly abused. Anonymous tips were common, often from disgruntled ex-members or neighbors with grudges, but we were required to investigate every single one. I drove out to Bishop Creek expecting to find nothing more than strict religious discipline, maybe some homeschooling that did not meet state standards. What I found was far worse. The commune sat at the end of a 15-mile dirt road, accessible only during summer months. 35 people living in a cluster of log cabins built around a central lodge where they took communal meals and held services. Brother Ezekiel, whose real name I later learned was Nathan Forbes, greeted me personally. He was in his early 50s, tall and lean, with the kind of charisma that made you want to trust him immediately. He spoke softly, made eye contact, and seemed genuinely pleased to have a visitor from the state. He gave me a tour, showed me the gardens where they grew vegetables, the schoolhouse where children learned reading, mathematics, and scripture, the sleeping quarters, simple but clean. Everything appeared above board. The children seemed healthy at first glance. They were thin, but not alarmingly so. They were quiet, which I attributed to shyness around strangers. They answered my questions politely, their answers clearly rehearsed. Yes, they were happy. Yes, they had enough to eat. Yes, they loved Brother Ezekiel like a father. I conducted individual interviews as protocol required, pulling each child aside to speak privately. Their answers never varied. Perfect consistency. Too perfect. Children, especially children in groups, always have slightly different perspectives, slight variations in their stories. These children spoke as if reading from a script. I visited 3 more times over the next month. Each visit revealed small inconsistencies that troubled me. The members were losing weight, not gradually but noticeably. Between visits, their energy levels seemed low. They moved slowly, spoke slowly, like people running on empty. When I asked about their diet, Brother Ezekiel explained they were practicing intermittent fasting for spiritual purification. When I asked to see their medical records, he produced documents showing everyone had been examined by a doctor in Glenallen 6 months prior. The documents looked legitimate, but something felt wrong. On my 4th visit, a woman named Jade Calloway slipped me a note. She did it while serving me tea in the communal lodge, her hand shaking as she placed the cup on the table. The note was folded small, hidden under the saucer. I palmed it without looking, tucking it into my pocket. In the bathroom, I read it. 4 words in desperate handwriting. They will not let us leave. I flushed the note, my hands shaking worse than Jade's had been. When I came back out, Brother Ezekiel was waiting, his smile unchanged. "Everything all right, Miss Walsh?" I nodded, finished my tea, left as quickly as I could without raising suspicion. I started digging into the commune's finances. It took weeks of record requests and legal maneuvering. But eventually I uncovered the truth. Every member had signed over their bank accounts, their property, their assets to the commune within weeks of joining. Brother Ezekiel controlled everything. The members had no money, no transportation, no way to leave even if they wanted to. I also discovered that Nathan Forbes was wanted for financial fraud in Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. He had operated similar communes before, draining members' resources before, disappearing and starting over somewhere new. Alaska was just his latest operation. I brought this information to my supervisor, who authorized a welfare check with police presence. We arrived at midnight on October 3rd, 2018. 6 officers, 2 child protective service workers, and myself. We did not announce ourselves. We used the element of surprise because we feared Brother Ezekiel would flee or harm the members if he knew we were coming. The front door of the communal lodge was unlocked. Inside, we found the members gathered for what they called evening devotion. They were on their knees, heads bowed, while Brother Ezekiel stood at the front holding a chalice. He was mid-sentence when we entered. "Drink of the purification and be cleansed of earthly weight." The officers moved quickly. They secured Brother Ezekiel before he could react, and we began evacuating the members. That is when we saw the basement. One of the officers investigating the lodge found a door hidden behind a tapestry. The basement was set up like a laboratory. Bottles of antifreeze lined the shelves, industrial-sized containers of ethylene glycol, notebooks filled with dosage calculations, records of how much each member received in their food and water. Brother Ezekiel had been systematically poisoning everyone for months, small doses designed to cause chronic illness without triggering immediate alarm. The goal was not to kill them outright, but to weaken them, make them dependent, make them too sick to question or resist. We found evidence of 4 deaths, 4 members who had been buried in the woods behind the commune. Brother Ezekiel called them ascensions in his records. He wrote about them with pride, describing how their spirits had been purified through suffering and released from earthly vessels. Autopsies would later confirm they died from organ failure caused by antifreeze poisoning. The surviving members were hospitalized immediately. Most suffered from neurological damage, kidney damage, liver damage. The children were the worst affected. Their smaller bodies had absorbed higher concentrations relative to their weight. 2 of the children never recovered fully. They live with permanent brain damage, the result of months of consuming poison in their meals. Brother Ezekiel's philosophy was simple and monstrous. He believed that Alaska's isolation meant society's rules did not apply. He told investigators that laws were constructs of a corrupt system, that his commune existed outside that system, that he was building something pure and free from governmental interference. He called the poisoning purification. He said suffering brought people closer to divine truth, that weakening the body strengthened the spirit. He showed no remorse. Even when confronted with the dead children's bodies, he remained calm, insisting he had saved them from lives of mediocrity and sin. The rescue itself was chaos. Several members fought us. They physically fought the officers, trying to remove them, screaming that we were servants of darkness, that we were destroying their salvation. Stockholm Syndrome had taken root so deeply that they could not distinguish rescue from attack. They begged to stay. They begged for Brother Ezekiel to be released. The children were easier to remove, but they screamed too. They screamed for Father Ezekiel, reaching back toward him as we carried them to the vehicles. One little boy, maybe 6 years old, looked at me with tears streaming down his face and said, "He said suffering brings us closer to truth. Why are you taking us away from truth?" Brother Ezekiel consumed cyanide during his arrest. He had a capsule hidden in his clothing, and he bit down on it before officers could stop him. He died within minutes, still smiling. His last words a claim that we could not judge him because we existed in a fallen world and he existed above it. The investigation continued without him. We uncovered his trail across 4 states, 12 years of operating similar communes, dozens of victims. Alaska was supposed to be his final sanctuary, the place remote enough that no one would find him. The survivors struggle. Even now, 5 years later, they struggle. Most return to their families, but the psychological damage remains. They attend therapy, take medications, try to rebuild lives that were stolen from them. But many still believe Brother Ezekiel's teachings. They admit he poisoned them, but insist his intentions were pure, that he loved them, that he was trying to help. Deprogramming from cult indoctrination takes years, sometimes decades. Some never escape it. 2 of the survivors disappeared back into the Alaskan wilderness within a year of being rescued. We do not know where they went or if they are alive. Search efforts found nothing. I left social work after Bishop Creek. I could not continue. Every case felt like Bishop Creek waiting to happen. Every isolated family felt like a potential cult. Every charismatic parent felt like Brother Ezekiel. I have nightmares where I am too late, where I arrive at the commune and everyone is already dead, where that little boy looks at me and asks why I took him away from truth, and I cannot answer because part of me wonders if he is right, if suffering does bring you closer to something, even if that something is just the understanding of how easily human beings can be broken. There are rumors of a new commune forming further north near Coldfoot. Rumors of a charismatic leader offering sanctuary and simple living. The descriptions match survivors from Bishop Creek, the ones who disappeared. I reported it to authorities, but there is nothing they can do without evidence of a crime. Alaska is too big, too wild, too full of places where people can disappear and live outside the reach of law. Brother Ezekiel is dead, but his poison remains. Not the antifreeze, the ideology, the belief that isolation equals freedom, that suffering equals purification, that one person's vision justifies any amount of damage to others. That poison spreads, it finds new hosts. And Alaska, with its endless wilderness and lack of oversight, provides perfect conditions for it to thrive. Voicemail received November 2nd, 2021, 3:47 AM. Jolene, it is Garrett. I do not know if this is going to send, but I am trying everything. Something is following us. Austin saw it first, but now we both see it. It is in the water. It is big, really big. If you get this message, if we do not come back, check the kayak GPS. The data is there. Someone needs to see it. Someone needs to know what is out here. I love you. Tell mom and dad I love them. Check the GPS. I have listened to that voicemail 832 times. I know because my phone keeps account of how many times you play a saved message. 832 times, and I still hear new things. Background sounds I missed before. The way Garrett's voice breaks on certain words. The fear that he is trying to control but cannot quite hide. My brother was not someone who scared easily. He had kayaked alone through some of the most dangerous waters in Alaska. He had survived capsizing and freezing conditions. He had encountered bears and rough seas and equipment failures. Nothing rattled him, but in that voicemail he was terrified. Garrett and his friend Austin McLeod left for a kayaking expedition in Glacier Bay on October 25th, 2021. It was supposed to be a 10-day trip following the coastline and camping on beaches, documenting wildlife and taking photographs for a project Austin was working on. They had done similar trips a dozen times. They were experienced, well-equipped, and cautious. They filed their float plan with the Coast Guard, listing their intended route and expected return date. Everything was done correctly. Everything was supposed to be safe. They were due back on November 4th. When they did not return, I filed a missing persons report on November 5th. The Coast Guard launched a search the same day. They found the kayaks on November 7th, tethered together, floating about 20 miles from where Garrett and Austin were last known to camp. All of their supplies were in the kayaks. Food, water, camping gear, cameras, phones, and waterproof bags. Nothing was missing. Nothing appeared disturbed. But Garrett and Austin were gone. No bodies, no signs of struggle, no indication of what happened. The GPS tracker was still attached to Garrett's kayak. Standard practice for long expeditions. It recorded their position every 15 minutes, creating a data trail that could be used for research or, in worst-case scenarios, for search and rescue. I demanded to see the data. The Coast Guard was hesitant at first, citing ongoing investigation protocols, but eventually they shared it with me. What I saw made no sense. For the first 8 days, the GPS data was exactly what you would expect. A steady progression along the coastline, stopping at reasonable camping spots, moving at speeds consistent with kayaking. Normal, predictable. Then, on November 2nd, the data changed. Starting at 1:30 a.m., the kayaks began moving in circles. Not drifting circles like they were caught in a current. Tight, deliberate circles around the same small area, roughly 500 meters in diameter. They circled for 8 hours straight. The speed data showed they were moving at 12 to 15 knots. That is impossible for kayaks. Human paddling speed averages 3 to 4 knots, maybe 6 if you are sprinting. 12 to 15 knots means they were being towed by something powerful, something fast. The final GPS coordinates placed them on land, not on a beach. On land 3 miles inland from the coast in a restricted area marked on nautical charts as a former military testing site. The area was closed to public access, surrounded by warning buoys and signs. According to official records, the site had been abandoned since the 1960s, used during the Cold War for submarine experiments and then decommissioned. But the GPS data was clear. At 6:43 a.m. on November 2nd, the kayaks were on land in that restricted zone. Then the signal stopped. I hired a private investigator. I needed answers the Coast Guard was not providing. The investigator, a former police detective named Raymond Cole, spent 3 weeks reviewing the case. He confirmed what I already suspected. The official investigation was being shut down. The Coast Guard ruled it an accidental drowning despite having no bodies and no evidence of drowning. The case was closed. Raymond found something else. He found diving reports from the search operation. Teams had gone down in the area where the kayaks were found, looking for bodies or wreckage. They found nothing in the water. But one diver reported seeing something on the seafloor that did not belong. A large cylindrical object, man-made, partially buried in sediment. When he tried to investigate closer, his communication line was cut and he was ordered to surface immediately. No further dives were authorized. I decided to see the restricted area myself. I drove to the closest access point, a service road that ended at a locked gate with faded military signage warning against trespassing. I parked and hiked around the gate, following what remained of an old road through dense forest. 2 miles in, I found the entrance to an underground facility. Concrete bunker, partially collapsed with a steel door that was newer than it should have been. The facility was supposed to be abandoned, but the door had a modern padlock. Fresh tire tracks led to the entrance, multiple vehicles within the past few weeks. I tried to force the lock. I failed. While I was attempting this, 2 men in private security uniforms appeared. They were polite but firm. I was trespassing on federal property. I needed to leave immediately or face arrest. I argued. I showed them photos of Garrett, explained he was missing, explained the GPS data led here. They did not care. One of them called someone on a radio, had a brief conversation I could not hear clearly, then told me that if I returned, I would be charged with federal crimes. They escorted me back to my car and watched until I drove away. I spent months researching the facility. Declassified documents revealed it was a submarine testing site during the Cold War, specifically for acoustic weapons. The Navy experimented with low-frequency sound waves designed to disorient enemy submariners, to disrupt their equipment, to make them surface. The experiments were discontinued in 1967 after several accidents. The nature of the accidents was redacted in every document I found. The facility was officially sealed and abandoned, but the fresh padlock and security presence suggested otherwise. 3 weeks ago, I received a package at my apartment in Juneau. No return address. Inside was a waterproof camera case, Garrett's camera case. I recognized it immediately from the stickers he had plastered on it. Inside the case was his camera, a rugged model designed for marine environments. The memory card was still inside. I downloaded the photos with shaking hands. Most were what I expected, scenic shots of coastline, wildlife, sunrise over glaciers. The final photos were different. They showed something in the water. The first few were distant, just a dark shape beneath the surface. Then closer. A massive cylindrical object, clearly man-made, with markings that looked military. In one photo, you could see Austin in his kayak in the foreground, looking back at the camera, his face pale with fear. The next photos were blurred, like Garrett was moving the camera frantically. The final photo showed the object surfacing. Only part of it was visible, but it was enormous, easily 100 feet long, dark metal covered in marine growth, and standing on top of it was a person in what looked like a diving suit. Old-fashioned, military. Wrong. I took the photos to Raymond. He analyzed them, consulted with experts. The consensus was that the photos were authentic, not manipulated. The object appeared to be a submarine or submersible, but the design did not match any known vessels. The diving suit was consistent with Cold War-era equipment. Raymond also had the photos analyzed for acoustic data. Modern cameras sometimes pick up frequencies beyond human hearing. The analysis revealed something disturbing. The photos contained embedded low-frequency sound consistent with acoustic weapons. The sound was designed to cause disorientation, panic, and suggestibility. The Coast Guard refuses to reopen the case. I filed Freedom of Information requests about the facility and the submarine experiments. Everything came back heavily redacted or denied on national security grounds. I contacted journalists, but none were willing to pursue the story without more evidence. I contacted families of other people who disappeared in Glacier Bay over the years. There have been dozens. Most were ruled accidents. Some had similar strange circumstances. GPS data that did not make sense. Reports of seeing large objects in the water. Witnesses describing sounds that made them feel sick or disoriented. I believe Garrett and Austin encountered something that is still operational in that area. A weapon, an experiment, a vessel that was never properly decommissioned. I believe they were killed to protect whatever secret is being kept at that facility. I believe the acoustic weapon is still being tested, still causing disappearances, still being covered up by people with the authority to make investigations disappear. I have no proof beyond the photos, the GPS data, and my brother's final message. It is not enough. It will never be enough to force a real investigation. I still kayak in Alaska. I know that sounds insane, but I cannot stop. I go to Glacier Bay regularly, staying close to the restricted area, watching for anything unusual. I carry multiple cameras, multiple GPS units recording everything. If something happens to me, if I disappear like Garrett, at least there will be more evidence. At least someone else might continue searching. The water in Glacier Bay is dark and deep and full of things we do not understand. Some of them are natural, some of them are not, and some of them are protected by people who would rather let kayakers vanish than admit what they have been doing in those waters for 60 years. Garrett's body was never recovered. Austin's body was never recovered. The official cause of death is listed as accidental drowning. Their families were told it was a tragic accident, that the ocean is unpredictable, that experienced kayakers die sometimes and we may never know why. But I know why. I know what happened. And I know it will happen again because nothing has changed. The facility is still there, the security is still there, the acoustic weapon, or whatever it is still operating. And kayakers will keep disappearing, their deaths ruled accidents, their families given platitudes about the dangers of wilderness recreation. I am writing this because someone needs to know the truth. If I disappear, if I am found drowned in Glacier Bay with no explanation, it is not an accident. Check the GPS, check the photos, look at the restricted area and ask why modern security guards patrol an abandoned Cold War facility. Ask why divers are ordered away from certain areas. Ask why GPS data shows impossible movements and impossible speeds. Ask why so many people vanish in the same waters where the military tested acoustic weapons designed to disorient and kill. Ask these questions and do not accept the answers you are given. My brother's last message was to check the GPS. I checked it, now I am telling you. Something is in those waters, something that should not be there, something that killed Garrett and Austin, something that is still killing. And no one with the power to stop it cares enough to try. The detective asked me to start from the beginning, so here it is. My name is Ramona Thorne, and I killed a man. Or rather, I tried to kill him, and I wish I had succeeded because he is still out there, still fishing, still hunting. The detective nodded when I said that, writing in his notepad like this was a normal statement. Nothing about what happened on that boat was normal. Nothing about the 3 weeks I spent on the Bering Sea with Captain Mitchell Royce was anything except a nightmare that I survived through luck and the help of women who should not have had to save me. I needed work. It was that simple. I had bills, rent, student loans from a degree I never finished. I saw the job posting at a maritime hiring hall in Kodiak. deckhand position on a commercial fishing vessel, 3 weeks, good pay. I had no fishing experience, but the posting said they would train. I applied. Captain Royce hired me over the phone after a 5-minute conversation. He said he liked hiring women because they worked harder and complained less. That should have been my first warning, but I needed the money too badly to listen to instincts. I arrived at the dock on June 3rd. The boat was called the Alaskan Dawn, a 70-foot commercial fishing vessel that had seen better decades. Captain Royce met me personally, shook my hand, welcomed me aboard. He was in his 50s, weathered face, calm demeanor. He introduced me to the other crew members, all women, 5 of us total, including myself. That struck me as unusual, but Captain Royce explained he ran an all-female crew because he believed women were underrepresented in the fishing industry. It sounded progressive. It sounded like an opportunity. It was a trap. The first week was normal. We worked long hours, pulled nets, sorted fish, learned the rhythm of the boat. Captain Royce was professional, even encouraging. He taught us techniques, praised our work, made us feel capable. But there were odd rules. No personal cell phones allowed on deck. All phones locked in the captain's cabin for safety reasons, he said, to prevent them from being damaged or lost overboard. We were only allowed to use the satellite phone in the cabin for emergencies and only with his permission. Cabin doors locked at night from the outside. For our safety, he explained, so we would not sleepwalk off the boat. These rules felt strange, but I was new to fishing. I assumed this was standard procedure. The second week, things changed. One of the other crew members, a woman named Corinne, tried to use the satellite phone without permission. She wanted to call her mother, who was sick. Captain Royce caught her. He did not yell. He did not threaten. He simply took the phone and locked it away, then told Corinne she was fired and would be dropped at the next port. We were 3 days from port. That night, Corinne's cabin was empty. Captain Royce said she had decided to sleep in the hold because she was angry. We never saw her again. When I asked about her the next morning, Captain Royce said she had gotten off the boat during a supply stop. But I had been awake during that stop. There was no supply stop, no port, just open water. That was when I started paying attention. I went through my belongings and realized my identification was missing. My driver's license, my passport, everything I needed to prove who I was. The other women admitted the same thing had happened to them. Our documents were gone. We searched the captain's cabin when he was on deck. We found a locked box under his bunk. We could not open it, but we could hear things shifting inside. Papers, identification cards. We found something else too. A journal poorly hidden behind a loose panel. The journal contained entries spanning 4 years. Names, dates, descriptions, women he had hired, women he had killed. Women whose bodies he had dumped into the Bering Sea, weighted down with chains. Captain Royce was systematic. He targeted women who were desperate for work, women with few family connections, women who would not be immediately missed. He hired them, isolated them on his boat, and then killed them one by one over the course of each fishing season. He described his methods in the journal with disturbing pride. How he made the deaths look like accidents. How he disposed of evidence. How the ocean was the perfect accomplice, erasing everything, keeping his secrets. He had killed 7 women over 4 years. Corinne was the 8th. We were meant to be 9 through 12. We confronted him that night, all 4 of us together in the galley after dinner. We told him we knew. We demanded he take us to port immediately. We threatened to report him. Captain Royce listened calmly, then smiled. "Report me to who?" he asked. "We are 300 miles from land. No radio, no witnesses, no proof. And if you try to overpower me, remember that I am the only one who knows how to navigate this boat. Without me, you will drift until you starve or freeze." He pulled a pistol from his jacket. "Here is what is going to happen. You are going to choose. One of you survives to tell the story. The other 3 feed the crabs. You have until morning to decide." He locked himself in the cabin. We spent the night in terror, huddled together, trying to formulate a plan. Captain Royce had isolated us perfectly. We were surrounded by deadly water with no way to call for help, no way to navigate to safety. He had us trapped. But he made a mistake. He assumed we would turn on each other. He assumed fear would make us weak. Instead, we organized. We had skills he had not accounted for. One woman, Leah, had worked construction. She knew tools. Another, Destiny, had been a nurse. She knew anatomy, knew where to strike to disable someone. I had taken martial arts as a teenager. Not much, but enough. We planned through the night. Morning came. Captain Royce emerged from the cabin, gun in hand. "Have you decided?" he asked. We attacked. Leah hit him with a wrench, aiming for his gun hand. The gun discharged, the bullet embedding in the ceiling. Destiny went for his knees, collapsing him to the deck. I grabbed the gun while he was down. We should have killed him then. We should have thrown him overboard or shot him or done anything to ensure he could never hurt anyone again. But we were not killers. We tied him up instead. We locked him in the hold. We tried to navigate. None of us knew how, but we tried. We used the boat's GPS, following coastline markers, moving slowly toward Kodiak. It took 4 days. 4 days of constant fear that Captain Royce would escape, that we would run aground, that we would be caught in a storm we could not handle. We took turns guarding the hold, listening to him down there, alternating between promises and threats. He promised money if we let him go. He promised to let us live. Then he threatened us, described what he would do when he got free, how he would make us suffer for humiliating him. We reached Kodiak on June 23rd. The Coast Guard met us at the harbor. We told them everything. They arrested Captain Royce. They searched the boat and found the journal, the locked box of identification cards, evidence of 7 murders. But the bodies were gone. The ocean had taken them just as he planned. Without bodies, the prosecution's case was weak. Captain Royce hired expensive lawyers. He claimed the journal was fiction, a creative writing project. He claimed we had attacked him unprovoked, that we were disgruntled employees angry about working conditions. He claimed we stole the identification cards ourselves as part of an extortion scheme. The trial was a nightmare. The defense tore us apart on the stand. They questioned our credibility, our backgrounds, our financial situations. They suggested we were lying for attention, for money, for some twisted psychological reason. The jury deliberated for 6 days. They found Captain Royce guilty of manslaughter, not murder. The judge sentenced him to 8 years. He served 3 before being released on a technicality related to evidence handling. Some of the identification cards had been processed incorrectly. The defense argued his rights had been violated. The appeals court agreed. Captain Royce is free now. He lives in Dutch Harbor. He owns another boat. He is fishing again. Legally, there is nothing stopping him. He was convicted of manslaughter, not murder. He is not prohibited from operating a vessel or hiring crew. I see news articles sometimes about missing deckhands, women who were last seen boarding fishing vessels in Dutch Harbor or Kodiak or Seward. The authorities investigate. They find nothing. Bodies do not surface from the Bering Sea. Evidence does not survive in salt water and currents. The ocean keeps its secrets, just like Captain Royce knew it would. I do not fish anymore. I barely leave my apartment. I work remotely doing data entry, avoiding people. I have nightmares where I am back on that boat, where Captain Royce is standing over me with his gun, where I am choosing which of my friends has to die. I see therapists. I take medication. I do everything I am supposed to do to heal. But healing is impossible when your attacker is still free, still hunting, still killing. 2 months ago, another woman disappeared. Her name was Vanessa Cortez. She was hired as a deckhand on a vessel out of Dutch Harbor. The vessel was the Alaskan Dawn. Same boat, same captain. Vanessa's family reported her missing after she failed to return from a 3-week fishing trip. The Coast Guard investigated. Captain Royce said Vanessa quit mid-season, that she got off at a supply stop in Cold Bay. The authorities checked. There was no record of her in Cold Bay. No one saw her get off the boat. No one has seen her since. The case is still open, but I know how it will end. Vanessa is gone. She is at the bottom of the ocean, weighted down, erased. And Captain Royce is fishing. I am writing this because I do not know what else to do. I reported the disappearance. I told the police about Captain Royce's history, about the trial, about everything. They said they would investigate. I do not believe them. The system failed before, it will fail again. Captain Royce understands how to exploit isolation, how to target vulnerable women, how to make evidence disappear. He is smarter than the people trying to stop him. Or maybe they are not trying hard enough. Maybe one dead deckhand is not worth the resources. Maybe women who take dangerous jobs are expected to accept dangerous outcomes. If you are reading this and considering work on a fishing vessel in Alaska, please research the captain, research the boat, talk to former crew members, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And if you hear about the Alaskan Dawn, if Captain Mitchell Royce tries to hire you, run. Do not take the job. Do not get on that boat. You will not come back. I survived because I had help, because other women fought with me, because we got lucky. Luck runs out. Help is not always available. Captain Royce is still out there. He is still fishing, and he will keep killing until someone stops him permanently. Interview transcript. Alaska Folklore Project. Interviewer: can you state your name and occupation for the record? Subject: my name is Kendall Rivers. I was a teacher. I taught kindergarten through 8th grade in a village near Frozen Lake. I do not teach anymore. Interviewer: can you tell us what happened? Subject: I can tell you what I saw. Whether you believe it is another matter entirely. I moved to the village in August of 2020. Population 89, give or take. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone and outsiders are noticed immediately. I was hired to teach the combined classroom, 12 students ranging from 5 to 14 years old. The pay was good, the contract included housing, and I needed a fresh start after a difficult year in Fairbanks. The village seemed perfect, small, quiet, isolated. I thought isolation would be peaceful. I was wrong about what isolation protects. The village elder, a woman named Margaret Crow, met me when I arrived. She helped me settle into the teacher's cabin, showed me around, introduced me to families. She was kind but serious. Before she left that first evening, she stood in my doorway and said something I did not understand at the time. Do not ask about the lake children. If the students mention them, redirect the conversation. If you see something you do not understand, keep it to yourself. I asked what she meant. She just shook her head and left. School started in September. The 12 students were polite, quiet, almost unnaturally well-behaved. They worked diligently, followed instructions without question, and never caused disruptions. Every single one wore a silver pendant on a leather cord around their neck. The pendants were identical, circular, with symbols etched into the surface that I did not recognize. Not English, not any indigenous language I was familiar with. When I asked about them, the children said they were family heirlooms. When I asked parents, they changed the subject. The first strange thing I noticed was how the children sometimes spoke in unison. Not deliberately, not like they were reciting memorized material. They would answer questions at the exact same moment, using the exact same words with the exact same inflection. It happened 3 or 4 times in the first week. I thought it was coincidence. Children in small communities often develop similar speech patterns. But then it kept happening. And it was not just speech. They would turn their heads at the same moment, reach for pencils at the same moment, laugh at the same moment, even when nothing funny had occurred. The second strange thing was their artwork. I assigned a free draw project, told them to draw anything they wanted. All 12 children drew the same image, not similar, identical. A frozen lake with faces pressed against the ice from underneath. The faces were detailed, agonized, children's faces with wide eyes and open mouths. I watched them draw. They did not look at each other's work. They did not collaborate. They just drew, each creating the exact same composition in the exact same style. When I asked what they were drawing, they said it was frozen lake. When I asked about the faces, they said those were the lake children. The ones who lived there, one girl said. The others nodded. I tried to research the pendants. The village had limited internet, but I found nothing matching the symbols. I asked Margaret Crow again. This time she was less patient. I told you not to ask about the lake children. That includes the pendants. They protect the students. Leave it alone. But I could not leave it alone. I was responsible for these children's well-being. If something was wrong, if they were being abused or indoctrinated into some kind of cult, I needed to know. I went to the lake one afternoon in late September. It was already freezing over, thin ice forming near the shore. The lake was maybe a mile across, surrounded by spruce forest, isolated even by village standards. There was nothing remarkable about it visually, just a lake. But standing there, I felt wrong, watched, unwelcome. I heard something beneath the ice, not cracking, singing, faint, distant, multiple voices singing in a language I did not know. I convinced myself it was wind or my imagination or acoustic tricks caused by ice forming. But I left quickly. I practically ran back to the village. That night I researched the village's history. I found a reference in a regional archive to an incident in 1889. An indigenous village had been located on the same site. 23 children disappeared overnight in December. No tracks, no signs of struggle. Search parties found them 3 days later standing on the frozen lake in formation, unresponsive to calls or attempts to bring them back. When rescuers approached, the children walked into open water where the ice had broken. They walked willingly, deliberately. All 23 drowned. Bodies were never recovered. The lake was too deep, the current too strong. The survivors abandoned the village. A new settlement was built on the same location in the 1920s. During excavation, workers found the silver pendants buried in a circle around where the old village center had been. The pendants predated Russian colonization, possibly by centuries. Their origin was unknown. I showed this research to Margaret Crow. She read it silently, then looked at me with something between pity and anger. This is why outsiders do not last here. You cannot leave things alone. Yes, the lake children exist. Yes, they take our children sometimes. The pendants keep them safe. The pendants keep them connected. Would you rather they drown like the others did? I asked what she meant by connected. She would not answer. She told me to stop asking questions or leave the village. I should have left. I know that now. But I stayed because I thought I could help. I thought I could save these children from whatever was happening. Arrogance, ignorance, both. In October, I witnessed it myself. I woke at midnight to a sound outside my cabin. Footsteps on gravel, multiple sets. I looked out the window and saw all 12 students walking toward the lake. They were in their pajamas, barefoot, walking in single file. I threw on clothes and followed, keeping my distance. They walked to the lake shore, stepped onto the ice, and formed a circle in the center. The ice should not have held their weight. It was too thin, too new. But it held. They stood there holding hands, swaying slightly, and the singing started. The same singing I had heard before, but louder now, coming from the children themselves. Except their mouths were not moving. The sound came from around them, beneath them, through them. I called out. I stepped onto the ice. The singing stopped. All 12 children turned to face me in perfect unison. Their eyes were empty, not closed, not glazed over. Empty, like looking into windows with nothing behind them. I approached the nearest child, a boy named Thomas. I shook his shoulder, trying to wake him. The ice beneath us groaned. Cracks spread from where I stood. I heard Margaret Crow's voice behind me. "Get off the ice, now!" I backed away. The children remained standing. Margaret walked onto the ice, moving carefully, and touched each child's forehead. She whispered something I could not hear. Slowly, the children's eyes returned. Awareness came back. They looked confused, cold, frightened. Margaret led them back to shore one by one. She did not explain. She took the children home and told me to go back to my cabin. The next morning, she came to see me. They sleepwalk sometimes. It is part of the connection. The lake calls them. The pendants usually keep them from answering, but sometimes the call is too strong. Do not interfere again. You made it worse. You broke the circle. I asked what would have happened if I had not broken the circle. She said they would have stood there until sunrise, then walked home with no memory of it. They have been doing this for generations. It is the price we pay for living here. The lake gives us fish, fresh water, protection from storms. In return, it asks for connection. The children are that connection. I tried to get help. I called Child Protective Services, reported suspected abuse. They sent an investigator 3 weeks later. The investigator spent 2 hours in the village, interviewed the children, and parents found nothing concerning. The children denied sleepwalking. The parents denied everything. The investigator told me I seemed stressed, suggested I take a leave of absence. No further action was taken. In November, one of the children collapsed during class. Thomas, the same boy I had tried to wake on the ice, he fell from his chair, seizing, foam coming from his mouth. I called for medical evacuation. A helicopter came and took him to Fairbanks. The doctors could not explain what happened. His organs were shutting down. They said his internal temperature was too low, like he was freezing from the inside despite normal external conditions. He died 2 days later. The cause of death was listed as unknown. His body was returned to the village for burial. I attended the funeral. Thomas's parents did not speak to me. Neither did anyone else. I was blamed. Margaret Crow told me directly. You woke him on the ice. You interrupted the connection. The lake does not forgive interruptions. I left the village the next day. I quit my position, packed my belongings, and drove back to Fairbanks. I have not returned. I have tried to report what I saw, tried to get authorities to investigate, tried to get those children removed from that village. No one believes me. Or if they believe me, they do not care. The village is too remote, too small, too unimportant, and the families will not cooperate. They protect the lake. They protect the connection. They sacrifice their children to maintain it because that is what their ancestors did and what their descendants will continue doing. I do not know what the lake children are. Spirits, ghosts, echoes of the drowned. I do not know why they call to the living children or what they want. But I know the pendants create a link. I know the children who wear them are not fully themselves. They share thoughts, share movements, share something with whatever is beneath that ice. And I know that interrupting that connection kills them. Thomas died because I tried to save him. The other children will die eventually too, either from the connection or from breaking it. There is no escape for them. They were born into this. They will die in this. The village still exists. Teachers still come and go. Most do not stay long enough to notice anything wrong. Those who do notice learn to ignore it or leave. I chose to leave. I chose to keep talking even though no one listens. Because those children deserve someone to remember them as individuals, not as vessels for something ancient and hungry that lives beneath frozen water. They deserve someone to say their names and acknowledge that what is happening to them is not normal, not acceptable, not the price anyone should have to pay for fresh water and fish. But I could not save them. I could only save myself. And that knowledge follows me everywhere I go. Every night when I close my eyes and see 12 children standing on ice, staring at me with empty eyes, singing songs in languages that should be dead. Therapy session transcript, Dr. Helena Martinez, clinical psychologist. Date, October 12, 2024. Patient, Paige Kimball, female, age 28. Session notes. Patient exhibits signs of severe trauma and possible dissociative disorder. Memories described do not align with documented history. Recommend continued observation for false memory syndrome or elaborate delusion system. Patient insists memories are real, despite contradictory evidence. Patient statement. No one believes me, but I remember. I remember everything. The compound, the council, the purifications. I remember Harper Lee dying in front of me. I remember the taste of the food we grew ourselves, the smell of wood smoke from the communal fires, the sound of morning prayers that lasted 3 hours. I remember 16 years of my life in that place. But according to every official record, every document, every piece of evidence, none of it happened. I was never there. The compound never existed. And I do not know anymore if I am telling the truth or if I have gone completely insane. My earliest memory is of the compound. I was maybe 4 years old, standing in a circle with other children while the council explained that we were the chosen ones. That the world outside had ended in fire and plague. That we were the last remnants of humanity, protected by the council's wisdom and God's grace. I believed this until I was 16. I had no reason not to believe it. Everything I knew came from the council. They controlled all information, all education, all contact with anything beyond our walls. The compound sat in a valley somewhere in Alaska. I do not know exactly where because we were not taught geography beyond what we could see. There were 15 families, maybe 60 people total. We lived in log structures that we built ourselves, grew our own food in greenhouses, raised chickens and goats. Everything was communal. We owned nothing individually. We were assigned tasks based on the council's decisions. Children were educated in scripture, practical skills, and obedience. Questions were discouraged. Disobedience was punished publicly during what they called purifications. The council consisted of 5 elders. I remember their names. Elder Matthias, Elder Ruth, Elder Jonah, Elder Sarah, Elder Cain. They were not elected. They claimed divine appointment. They made all decisions, interpreted all scripture, determined all punishments. We called them the council and spoke to them only when spoken to first. They wore white robes during ceremonies. They sat at the head of communal meals. They watched us constantly, or at least it felt that way. There were always eyes on us, always someone reporting back to the council if you spoke out of turn or failed to complete your work or expressed doubt. I witnessed purifications from childhood. They happened in the central meeting hall with all compound members required to attend. The accused would be brought forward, their sins announced by the council, and then the punishment would be administered. Sometimes it was physical, whipping, branding, forced labor in extreme conditions. Sometimes it was psychological, Public humiliation, isolation in the prayer box for days, forced confessions broadcast to everyone. I saw a teenage girl named Harper Lee purified when I was 14. Her sin was corruption. She had questioned the council's teaching about the outside world, suggested that maybe humanity had not ended, that maybe we were being lied to. The purification lasted 3 days. On the 3rd day, Harper Lee died. They said her spirit had been cleansed through suffering and released to heaven. We buried her in the forest behind the compound. I helped dig the grave. When I was 16, I found a radio. It was hidden in a storage shed buried under old tarps. I do not know how it got there or who it belonged to. I turned it on and heard voices, news broadcasts, music, advertisements for products I had never heard of. The world was not dead. Everything the council taught us was a lie. I told another teenager, a boy named Quinn Bradford. Together we planned to escape. We waited for winter because we knew the deep snow would cover our tracks. We gathered supplies secretly, dried food, warm clothes, matches. We studied the compound's perimeter, looking for weak points in the fence. 4 other teenagers found out about our plan. They wanted to come with us. We said yes because we thought there was safety in numbers, but 2 of them, Sarah Chen and Michael Torres, were caught stealing supplies the night before we planned to leave. The council interrogated them. They confessed everything. The council made examples of them, public execution by hanging in the meeting hall. They were 17 and 16 years old. The council said their souls were too corrupted to be saved, that death was the only mercy they deserved. We were all forced to watch. Quinn and I ran that night. We could not wait anymore. We knew we would be next. We climbed the fence during a snowstorm, ran into the forest with almost no supplies, no map, no real plan beyond getting away. The temperature was below 0. The snow was waist-deep in places. We walked for a week, maybe longer. I lost track of time. We ate bark and melted snow for water. Quinn developed frostbite. His toes turned black. He could barely walk by the end. But we kept moving because stopping meant dying. We found a road finally, a real paved road with tire tracks. We followed it until a truck stopped. The driver was an older man who took us to the nearest hospital in Glenallen. That is where everything stopped making sense. The police came. They asked questions. I told them everything. About the compound, the council, the purifications, Harper Lee and Sarah and Michael, the lies about the world ending. They listened and took notes. Then they investigated and found nothing. No compound, no log structures, no greenhouses or communal buildings. The coordinates I gave them led to empty wilderness. They searched the area extensively. No evidence of recent habitation, no graves, no buried bodies, no physical proof that anyone had lived there. They checked missing persons reports. No one named Harper Lee, Sarah Chen, or Michael Torres matched my descriptions. No families matching the ones I described had ever been reported missing. The council members I named did not exist in any database. No criminal records, no birth certificates, no social security numbers, nothing. Then they showed me my official records. According to the state of Alaska, I was born in Anchorage to parents who died in a car accident when I was 6. I was placed in foster care. I lived in 3 different homes between ages 6 and 16. I attended public schools. I had report cards, medical records, photographs, documents proving I had lived a completely different life than the one I remembered. They showed me photos of myself at ages where I remembered being at the compound. In the photos, I was at birthday parties, school events, foster family gatherings. I did not recognize any of it. But the photos were real. Professional analysis confirmed they were not manipulated. That was me in the photos, living a life I do not remember. Quinn Bradford was found dead 2 months after our escape. He hanged himself in his apartment in Palmer. The police ruled it suicide. He left a note that said, "I made it all up and nothing else." I went to his funeral. His family would not speak to me. His sister told me I had poisoned his mind with delusions, that he had been fine until he met me, that I was responsible for his death. She showed me Quinn's actual history. He had grown up in Palmer. He had never lived at any compound. He had struggled with mental illness for years. Everything he told me about the compound, about the council, matched my memories perfectly. But according to evidence, neither of us had ever been there. My therapist believes I created false memories to cope with trauma from my actual childhood. She says foster care can be traumatic, that some children invent elaborate alternate realities to escape psychological pain. She says my memories of the compound are symbolic representations of feeling controlled and isolated in the foster system. She says Quinn had similar trauma, and we reinforced each other's delusions, creating a shared false memory system. She is kind when she says this. Gentle, like she is trying not to break me further, but I have scars, physical scars from purifications, scars on my back from whipping, burn scars on my wrists from being restrained with hot metal during punishment ceremonies. The doctors say these are consistent with childhood accidents. They point to my medical records showing treatment for various injuries during my foster care years. Falls, accidents while playing, a kitchen fire incident. But I remember how I got these scars. I remember the pain of the whip. I remember the smell of my own skin burning. Those memories feel more real than any birthday party photograph. 3 weeks ago, I received an anonymous package. No return address, postmarked from Anchorage. Inside was a single photograph. It showed the compound exactly as I remember it. Log buildings arranged in a circle around a central meeting hall, greenhouses, a fence, people in simple clothes working in gardens. The photo was dated 2 weeks before I received it. On the back, someone had written, "Still here." I took the photo to the police. They said it could be any survivalist homestead in Alaska. There are dozens of similar setups. They said without GPS coordinates or identifying landmarks, they could not investigate. They suggested the photo might be something I created myself, either consciously or unconsciously as part of my delusion. I do not know what is real anymore. Either I am insane and imagined 16 years of my life in vivid detail, creating false memories so convincing that I can describe the texture of the compound's log walls and the exact color of Elder Matthias's eyes, or I am sane and something impossible has happened. Someone erased the compound. Someone erased all evidence of its existence. Someone created an entire false history for me, complete with documents and photographs and witnesses, all designed to make me question my own mind. My therapist asks which explanation is more likely. Elaborate government conspiracy to hide a survivalist cult and fabricate an alternate life history, or trauma-induced false memory syndrome. When she puts it that way, the answer is obvious. But then I look at the photograph. I look at my scars. I remember Harper Lee's face as she died. I remember the council's voices during morning prayer. I remember the taste of the food we grew, the specific prayers we recited, the names of children I lived with for years. How can all of that be invented? How can my brain create that level of detail, that depth of experience, that many consistent memories spanning 16 years? I dream about the compound every night. In the dreams, the council tells me that memory is unreliable, that reality is what they say it is, that I must accept their truth or be purified. I wake up unsure if I am in my apartment in Anchorage or in a bunk at the compound. Sometimes I check documents to remind myself who I am supposed to be. Sometimes I stare at the photograph and whisper the names of people who supposedly never existed. Harper Lee, Quinn Bradford, Elder Matthias, Sarah Chen, Michael Torres. I say their names like a prayer, like saying them enough times will make them real again. The worst possibility is not that I am insane. The worst possibility is that I am sane, that everything I remember is true, and that the council has the power and resources to erase reality itself. If they can make the compound disappear, make bodies disappear, create false histories for survivors, then they can do anything. They could be watching me right now. They could decide to erase me completely and no one would know I ever existed except as a name in fake foster care records. That possibility terrifies me more than insanity. At least insanity has treatment. What treatment exists for a reality that can be rewritten? I keep the photograph hidden. I do not show it to my therapist anymore because every time I do, she suggests I created it myself during a dissociative episode. Maybe she is right. Maybe I am so deep in delusion that I am manufacturing evidence to support my false memories, or maybe the council sent it. Maybe they want me to know they are still out there. Maybe they want me to keep questioning my sanity. Maybe that is the final purification. Not death, but uncertainty. The inability to trust your own mind. The permanent state of questioning whether anything you remember is real. I am writing this because I need it recorded somewhere. If I am insane, maybe writing it down will help me recognize the patterns of my delusion. If I am sane, maybe someone will read this and believe me. Maybe someone will investigate properly. Maybe someone will find the compound before the council erases more people or hurts more children. Or maybe no one will believe me and I will spend the rest of my life in this liminal space between two realities. Never certain which one is true. Never able to fully exist in either. That might be what I deserve for surviving when Harper Lee and Sarah and Michael did not. Or maybe that is just another delusion. Another false memory of guilt that never happened. I do not know anymore. I do not know anything except that someone is lying. Either everyone else is lying to me or I am lying to myself. And I cannot figure out which possibility is worse.